Yeah.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Jan 25th Tinderbox Meetup. Mr. Bernstein, take it away.
You're on
You're
mute
on mute.
as normal. Where's
As
that damn button?
always, now I'm unmuted, I think.
You are.
Yes. So it's January 25th, the day after January 24th, Minneapolis, Alex Pretty. What on earth is happening to our country? Um, but we soldier on and somehow have football. Next week, we have Daniel Tubb coming to talk about multi-AI workflows with Tinderbox
Cool.
using multiple AIs at once. Two-fisted drinker, and that sounds really interesting.
Can you,
Uh,
on that note, real quick, can you be sure to
mhm.
send me, I want to promote that through my LinkedIn channel. Can you give me a quick bio and overview on that? Because I think more
I
people
will
want to come.
I will try to do that. Everything's going to be pretty messy for the next couple of days.
Yeah.
But
You're going to be
at
locked
some
in home.
point,
You're going to be
sorry,
locked at home, Mark. You're
I'm
going to be.
going Yep. I'm stuck at home and I've already, somewhat to the worse, having wiped my uh, side mirror casing, getting the car into the garage. Our garage is scaled for Model Ts, unfortunately, which were the state of the art when it was built. Yes, I will get that to you.
Thank you. Okay, but I distracted you. So we're Saturday. What else is going on?
That's what's going on. And here's Michael Becker.
All right, hey everybody. So typically what we do is we go around the room and new people introduce themselves. Nobody's new today. Hopefully somebody will show up or not. And then we jump into themes and we talk about personal projects. We actually have two themes today. Mark Bernstein has offered to give us a review of regular expression, which I'm particularly
Cool.
looking forward to. And then if we have time, I'd like to demonstrate and show my transcription diarization workflow I've developed with WhisperX. And so I've got a whole methodology now of taking audio video files, transcribing them, diarizing them, using reference files to be able to pull out where I speak within those, and then summarizing them all with local AI pipeline, local engines and the Ollama AI model, which then eventually can be pulled into Tinderbox. So I'll show some use cases for that. But before we jump into that, does anybody have any burning topics they've been working on? When haven't seen you in a while? Anything you
Smoldering will do.
particular smoldering's good too. Any particular topic you're working on or challenge you're interested in?
I've got things that I'm working on. They're not very much Tinderbox related, and I've been here for several of the past weeks. I just haven't been on camera and didn't have anything useful to say. So
Always have something useful
I
to
always
say.
appreciate the discussion.
All right, awesome. So, Mr. Bernstein,
Um,
why don't we start with you?
well, just as a quick side to put it into the calendar, I have a burning topic that it won't take very long, but I just thought it would be
Let's
worth
do it.
discussing with the group. I prefer to do it after the RegEx expression discussion because it might be somewhat related.
Perfect. All right, so we'll park you for after Mr. Bernstein.
Sure. One evergreen that I want to point out after some work earlier in the week, uh, if you have hangs and crashes or things with new Tinderbox updates, by all means, get in touch right away. We had a crash this weekend with the brand new update, and it worked. The document in question worked just fine in the old version. And as you know, we sped up uh, Tinderbox loading by a considerable factor in very large documents. But this fellow had a very large document with only about 1,000 notes, but 4 million words. And it turns out that we were parallelizing something that's normally fast, but if you have 4 million words, it's not fast, and Apple didn't make it re-entrant. So that bit has to be done serially. Why RTF unpacking should be uh, not thread safe. Beats the hell out of me, but I mean, you would think it's just a finite state machine, but so report these things. They are fixable. Now, we hit that. We hit share.
Oh, by
We
the way, Mr. Bernstein, on that note, on the
Yeah,
crash note I sent you earlier this week, I was able to realize that I had over 5,000 rules and edicts running in the background that was freezing everything. And so I was able to remove those using Attribute Browser, and all was right in the world.
great. Okay, and get my gallery out of the way, and here we are. So we've been talking about some Tinderbox fundamentals lately, and we spent 2 weeks talking about names and discovering that names are a quite perplexing subject. Um, but I thought maybe it was time to revisit regular expressions. I think most of us are reasonably good at regular expressions these days, but there are probably lots of Tinderbox beginners who haven't met them, and a refresher doesn't hurt. So I think that this is just about 10 minutes or so of what you need to know about regular expressions. Okay? Regular expression is a textual pattern that we use to make it easier to search for interesting notes. For example, you could search for Roosevelt or Churchill, or you can search for Van Damme without worrying too much about whether the V is capitalized. Or you could search for both Franklin Roosevelt or Franklin D. Roosevelt or Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And regular expressions were only developed in the 1950s, and they weren't just developed for this purpose at all. In fact, our use of regular expressions is just a coincidence. Uh, in the 50s, people were working out uh, both the limits of computation on various computing machines. In particular, were there interesting computing machines that were not as hard to analyze as the machines we call computers. And for example, if you think about how elevators used to work, how elevators had complex systems of logic relays, but they were just logic relays. So if you get to the top, you start going down. If you get to the bottom, you start going up. If you are passing the third floor and a button has been pressed on that floor, stop at that floor. If you're stopped at a floor, then open the doors. If the doors are open and you're ready to go, close the doors, so forth. Uh, This work grew out of earlier work in philosophy and logic, uh, asking things like, is language complete? That is, can everything that can be said in, say, French? Are there things that we can think but cannot possibly say in any language? Wittgenstein got very interested in that question. That turned out to not be fruitful. The question of are there mathematical proofs for every mathematical true statement? Surprised just about everyone by being shown to be demonstrably false. So that's why regular expressions happened. So we have Bertrand Russell, Kurt Gödel, Wittgenstein, Turing, all working on aspects of can mathematics or logic or computers do something? Can we establish limits to what they can do? And there are lots of places you can use regular expressions in Tinderbox. Most notably, the find bar. Uh, Quick aside, find bar does more than you think. Okay, most people just use the find bar to search for a string. And unless you use special characters like period or asterisk, you can use it that way. If you turn on case sensitivity, Uh, the find bar is smart about things like the German double S. Uh, you can turn off regular expressions if you need to search for punctuation. You can limit searches to just selected containers. This is not very discoverable, but it can be really useful if you've got a really big document and you just want to look in a certain place. It saves your searches within a session. If you've searched for something and you want to either search for it again or remember what you're working on after a phone call, those searches get saved.
I'm sorry, could you say that again? I missed that part.
Yeah, it saves a list of searches you've searched in this session. So
Oh, got it. Per session, but not like if you close the app and reopen it, they're gone.
right.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. Also, when you explode, when you explode by a delimiter, that delimiter is a regular expression. The syntax highlighter and the tagger both work on regular expressions. In the action language, contains and dot contains and dot contains any all search for texts matching a regular expression. Split strings at a delimiter that can be a regular expression. Replace and extract all use regular expressions. So there are plenty of opportunities. Now, anytime you are stuck, this is the definitive link for how regular expressions in Tinderbox work. This has changed. We used to use a different regular expression engine. We now use a new one. This is the new link. The old link is no longer operative. But if you need to get very far beyond the stuff we're covering in this 10 minutes, you're getting into very rare air indeed. So, as I said, mostly a regular expression pattern matches a character. If you say A, it looks for an A. If you say a Cherokee alphabet O, it looks for that character. If you look for Daring Fireball, it will find Daring Fireball. So it's almost literal string search, but there are a handful of special characters which expand its vistas tremendously. Okay. In particular, star means 0 or more occurrences of whatever came before. Plus means 1 or more occurrences of whatever came before. Period, I don't know how I missed that, matches character. The pipe, vertical bar, is either the stuff on the left or the stuff on the right, same as in Tinderbox. And question mark has a few uses depending on where it appears, but the main one is the thing before it can be matched 0 or 1 times, but we prefer once. So, for example, if this pattern matches both the British and the American spelling of color, it's all got to be there. It could be colorful, and we're agnostic on the presence of the U. So if we treat this as a shorthand for the space character, we can look for every occurrence of of 2 spaces or even more spaces. Since many of us learned to type when it was necessary to put 2 spaces after every period, but this is now a mark of someone who is so old that they still put 2 spaces after every period. And it doesn't look good in real typefaces. It looks good in like old-fashioned typewriters. This lets you search for any number of spaces, 2 or more. You can search for double hyphens that haven't been turned into N dashes or double N dashes or M dashes and all the sorts of dashes. You can search for like things in quotation marks. We already touched on optional characters. We can have email or e-mail.
Mark,
Yeah.
in your example there of the double quotes, I would assume that you have to do that when you're using the curly quotes as opposed to the straight quotes.
I did it with curly quotes because I was assuming that the
You're dealing
text would
with
have curly quotes for dialogue. You could,
right.
I believe, we will come to the characters that need to be escaped. I don't think
Right.
regular expressions you need to express double straight quotes. So it would work, but it's not going to match double straight quotes for this particular pattern.
Yeah, that was my point.
Okay. Straight brackets begin sets. Classes of characters you consider equivalent, and a character matches a set if its character is inside the set. For example, ABC would match an A or a B or a C, but not a D. You can abbreviate sets with a hyphen, so A to Z matches characters A through Z. Now, this originally meant having the ASCII character encoding of between A and Z. Now I believe it means the Unicode character encoding, but you almost always use it for this sort of task. The caret at the beginning of a set is negation, and so we can search for anything except an A, a B, or a C. And we can just have ranges smashed together. So A to Z and lowercase a to Z matches any English character, uppercase or lowercase, but wouldn't match a Cherokee O or a French Sedia. And so this can be handy if you want to get every cafe or fiance or every Roman numeral or 6-digit character hash codes, but not people's telephone numbers. This is the sort of thing which you probably would not do if you were just searching in the find bar, but might find a really helpful shortcut if you're automating some sort of import process and want to be sure you have the canonical form. For example, I wrote a paper on Viennese cafes in the 20s and computing therein. And it's really not stylish to have some accented cafes and some flat cafes. Okay, there are a few characters that are called meta characters that represent a shorthand for classes that might be easy to get wrong. For example, backslash, this is actually a backslash, not the thing that typographers call a solidus and we call just a slash. Backslash B is a word boundary, and it includes things like spaces and punctuation marks and non-breaking spaces and zero width spaces and other things that you might easily forget.
Tab characters.
So bad characters. Yes.
No, tab characters.
Tab characters. Thank you.
Okay.
Backslash D is a digit. Handy to have. That's not true. there's tab, end of line, white space characters, word characters. If you need to actually search for a backslash, you have my sympathy, and just double backslash will do it. Caret is the beginning of the
Well, I think the snowplow got Mark's feed.
Either that or ice got him.
For those in other climes, we're starting to get that snowstorm. Just kicked in about an hour ago.
Oh, yeah, it's coming down hard at this point, at least out in Hopkinton.
Mr. Anderson, missed you showing up.
Pick it up from here, Mark. Mark A.
Well, I'll throw in a thought whilst you wait for Mark to phase back in again. Is that something? And there'll be others probably here more expert at this than me. But this idea of beginning and end of string, I think, from a sort of lay, starting perspective, is actually quite confusing. Generally, because for instance, if you have, say, the text to a note, it's one string, but it also contains what we think of as paragraphs, which in a programming sense are normally thought of as lines. And so there is this whole sense of sometimes understanding that where the beginning of a string is in terms of what you think it is, as opposed to what the system thinks it is. And frankly, sometimes it's just it is a bit of trial and error. And normally, so once you find out what it is, it doesn't really matter that it wasn't what you thought it is. You now know. And I wouldn't think is that expect to trip over that, and I wouldn't worry when it happens. Mark is back.
Yeah. Oh, sorry about that. My entire internet is down, so I'm trying to patch in through my cell phone. We'll see how this goes.
So, by the way, Mark.
That's not what I want.
By the way, Mark, if you go back to your original slide when you talked about the where stuff.
Yep.
Can we look at that again real quick? You say where find bar. I think what you're also saying there is where another where is in action code, which then can be resolved in rules, edicts, stamps, etc. I think it'd be good to call that out.
Yeah. The last four items are all about
action
pieces
code.
of actions that use.
Right. But in looking in the map, it says where find bar. I think people might get to not realize that if they're just looking at the map view and not seeing that action code could be a box too.
Right.
The glories of incremental formalization, especially as a team. I tried to teach that to my students last week. They struggled.
So this is the slide that actually is worth the whole 10 minutes. This is a list, and it is correct, of all of the characters that you need to escape in regular expressions if you happen to be searching for them. So no, not single or double quotes, but yes, brackets, braces, parens, and the various wildcard characters and such. Now, advanced topics. Suppose we have, this is the text that we're looking for. This is the text we're searching. If we want to search for tags, we might say left angle bracket, then at least one character, and maybe more, and then a right angle bracket. And so we search for that and we get the whole thing. Why? Because we have a left angle bracket, we have some characters, and we have a right angle bracket. The whole thing matches. That's not what we were looking for. We were hoping to match div, in brackets, but we got the whole expression. Okay, this is called greedy matching because the system eats as much of the expression as it can. That's usually what you want, but not in this case. So if you put a question mark after your wildcard, instead of taking the longest possible match, it takes the shortest possible match. So now with the question mark, it finds div instead of returning the whole expression. So here again, we hit on this before. If we have a open curly quote and then some characters and a close, non-greedy and a close quote, we'll get the first line of dialogue. Without the non-greedy match, we would get everything from the first line of dialogue up to and including the last line of dialogue. Finally, while we're at it, things that are inside parentheses can be captured. You can both use them within regular expressions as \1, \2, \3, or the capture groups are returned to Tinderboxes $1, $2, and $3. $0 contains the whole match. Finally,
Mark, is it just worth expanding what the whole match means? It'll be obvious after the fact, but the first time around the point,
everything that the regular expression matches. So if you have capture. If you have sub expressions like here, this will be $1 for $1 will be Tinderbox Meetup. And $0 is everything that's matched. Finally, if we have, remember, question mark normally means 0 or 1 uses of whatever came before it. But here, if we have it at the beginning of a piece of an expression, it means either look ahead or look back. So look ahead, question mark equal, means look for one or more, look for things where I'm looking for, if we have the big cat and the small dog race towards the docks, looking for a word that is followed by the space and cat, but space and cat are not part of the match. We haven't matched them, so we just get the big cat, but we only match big if it's followed by cat. This is a sort of thing that you rarely need and would probably only use in actions, but when you need it badly. Similarly, look behind. We look for small, and if we have small, it's not part of the match, but we're interested in the next word. So if this way we get the words following something or the words preceding something. Okay. If you need more than this in regular expressions, you may be doing it wrong. In Tinderbox, you can do lots of stuff with regular expressions, but there are things you simply cannot do with regular expressions at all. However clever you get, you can ask to have 2 or 3 or 4 or any fixed number of copies of a thing, but you can't count the number of copies of a thing, and there's just no way to do it. So regular expressions can do a lot, but they can't do everything. There are alternatives to even complicated uses of regular expressions. In particular, when you start really wailing on your regular expressions, think about using the streaming interface with maybe a smattering of regular expressions at the very end. They're a useful tool, but there are other tools. And BBEdit, among other things, has a very nice pattern playground that lets you test regular expressions and verify that they do what you think they do. There's one built into Explode because when you're exploding, if you get the wrong regular expression, it can give you hundreds of notes when you only meant to get one, and that's unpleasant, and we can head that off fairly easily. But go use BBEdit and take a look at your regular expression. If you think regular expression is what you want to be using, but you just can't quite get your regular expression working. So that's what I've got. Mark.
I'm just thinking, perhaps you might expand slightly on one of the things you mentioned was, for instance, so you might go from regular expression to string parsing. So one of the sort of patterns I see there really is what it allows you to do is essentially match one line rather than a many-lined string, because something, again, one of the sort of dark corners that it's rather assumed. Most documentation that you find on regular expressions assumes you just know, because you've done years of computer science beforehand, that as to where line breaks do or don't make a sort of boundary in terms of regular expression matching. And my take on it is it's just a matter of trial and error. So sometimes if you think you should have got something you don't, that might be what's at play. And the nice thing about the sort of the string parsing thing is essentially what you're often doing is just take a whole lot of text, many lines of text, but just look at it one bit at a time. And the other thing, string parsing takes what you've matched and essentially throws it away. So the next thing you do, if you chain it onto the end of that, starts at where you left off. So it's great if one of the things it was sort of added for was people who want to pass through something like an email, where the fields are going to come in the same order. If you've got something that's all very random, then it may not quite work as you want, because each line you have no expectation. You might know it's, say, a field name and a delimiter and a value, but you don't know which field, so it gets more complicated. But that's just something to bear in mind.
So, Mark, I do have a regular expression question. If you can, if I can ask, because I've been struggling with this lately. Let me share my screen and show you my issue. And this used to work, and I can't figure out what I'm doing wrong. It's super simple. Come on. There we go. So a lot of the times I will be working in Markdown, and I want to explode at the hashtags, right? So I can break in the document. And what I'm finding is when I go to explode, where is it? Here it is. hotkeys. All right. So I go to
Menu, yeah.
yeah, I go to the explode, and when if I just explode at a hashtag with a space, it's not doing what I expect. I expect it only to give me the heading ones, and it's exploding at everything. Heading ones and heading two. So it's not respecting the space. And then if I try to do the caret, only do it at the beginning of the line, it only recognizes one note. So I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing wrong.
Yeah.
Mr. Anderson solved this for me at one point. But
Well, one thing that occurred to me is that you can be more explicit with exactly what you mean. So you could say caret, hash, curly brackets, 1. So you're saying that, you know, I only want, and you could do a look ahead to say before a space. In other words, because if there's a space after it, it emphatically can't match if there's another hash after it.
I've done that before, but look, it only gives me 1. So I can't, I just don't know what's going on.
Wait a minute. The in this case, the caret is the beginning of the string, so it's the beginning of the whole of text. So you don't want that. You think you're saying the beginning of the line, but in fact, this is one string.
Right. So how do you?
If memory serves, and this goes back to the point of, okay, so where is the beginning and the end of the string? Sometimes it contains line breaks and sometimes it doesn't. And the truth of the matter is you can almost guarantee that whatever it is not the thing you thought it was. So you just do a bit of testing and lean into it as it comes out.
Right.
But if you, for instance, if you did hashtag space, I would imagine you would only break on the heading ones.
You don't. It breaks on all 8.
How about hashtag plus?
Hashtag plus still breaks on all 8. It breaks on the. It's still. It's not.
Sorry, hashtag question mark, which is 0 or 1. Was 0 or 1? No, that wouldn't work because you get all the lines without a.
Oh, I think I know. Maybe try this.
Hashtag star.
There you go. That does it. I answer my own question. So if I, to your point, if Mark, it's the caret doesn't work because it thinks of the whole document. If I use the only do it at a line break, the beginning of a line break, and then a hashtag space, that does it.
That's it.
And so then if I do that, then I get my 2, and then I can go in here. Whoops. And then I can, but then that leaves that.
Well, as long as your source text didn't start with the first heading 1 at the beginning of the string, because there will be no blank line in front of it.
Right.
Which is another pattern you find quite often, is that you often have to capture both of those, because the thing that you want doesn't capture the first or sometimes the end, last case.
Now if I do that, that gives me the main text as I expect, and there you go. And then I can go here, do it again, and then say, now give me 2. Oops. And then I get the 2. All right, cool. So it's the key is use line break. Got it. Thank you.
Well, one comment would be, depending on what your text is, if you're dealing with text that's imported from the Windows world, you might have to look for 2 line breaks.
Okay.
Problem that people like me run into all the time. But
yeah.
So and sometimes in a line feed carriage return, which can also, you might have to search specifically for those 2 ASCII characters, but that's rare these days, I think. At least I haven't seen it in a while.
All right, and then I got one other demo I can show too here. See if I can get this to work. All right. And what other, does anybody, while we're doing this, does anybody else have any other examples that they use when doing regular expression. I think that would be helpful.
Well, one other thing that you and I've discussed, and again, is a sort of thing that's blunderingly obvious after the fact, but sometimes if you've been sat, all afternoon banging your head against the regex that's getting just to the edge of what you want, but never quite, is sometimes if you can't find the thing that you want or it doesn't seem to match, sometimes replacing it with one or more characters that you absolutely know don't occur elsewhere can get you to that point. Even if necessary, you have to capture them and then change them back again. The world shouldn't be like that, but sometimes it is.
Okay. All right. How about you, Chuck? How else do you use regular expressions, or when?
So, I do a lot of pattern matching in some of the imports I do. The fairly common problem, if you look, for example, at my package management, I included a little example package, which are just some tools for dealing with things like IP addresses and MAC addresses. And honestly, I will admit that the parsing of an IP address is something I just looked up because it's so common. There are many examples out there. So all you have to do is just poke into an old-fashioned web search and you'll find it. How to do a regex for an IP address. And of course, there are IPv4 and IPv6 addresses, and there are MAC addresses, and there are Bluetooth addresses, and there are all kinds of things that you can do searches for. But I thought Mark's rendition there was one of the most useful introductions to regex I've seen. So I thought that was kind of nice.
Yeah. And to your point, one thing is AI was really helpful for regex.
Oh yeah,
it's really
well even before AI, just asking for things that are common. If you're doing something you expect other people are doing, you can very easily find people who put up examples of just about every possible common thing that you encounter. Dealing with timestamps and things like that. One of the reasons why this is so prevalent is that regex is extensively used in analyzing log files. So anybody who deals with development operations, DevOps, is often just plowing through massive log files. And so having fast tools that can allow you to go and find just the log records that are of interest is a toolkit or a methodology that just about anybody in that space gets very good at. I won't claim I'm good at it to the extent that people who practice it all the time are, but it's a very common example of where regex is a powerful tool used extensively by people as a professional survival mechanism.
Mm-hmm. But I'll show another example I use it for while we're at it. I mean, we've talked ad nauseum during our meetups, but I use prefixes in my notes for a whole lots of reasons. And in order to then be able to render that maybe I want to use I want to use the name somewhere without the prefix, and to do that, I just use a simple regex replace. Grab the text from the beginning of the line, aka the name, all of the text up to the hyphen space, and then stick that into a variable and then populate the short title. So if I go like that, that then populates, here's the name without the short title. And then in my templates, I can just do value. Let me turn off smart quotes. Come on. Where's trans substitution smart quote value?
Put in the double quote, straight double quote, and just hit Command Z immediately afterwards. As soon as it turns it to a smart quote, hit Command Z and it'll turn it back to a.
Oh, really? I did not know that. So now so in like my templates, if I'm doing value short title, I can then pull the short title into my output without having to have the prefix. And so I have a function running in the background that's literally on every one of my on visit notes that's doing that for me. So then that way that's how I'm able to use the prefix for my own workflows, but yet still get a pure name. That's just an example. And then for others that are interested, I find this website really helpful for regex training and tutorials. I spent a lot of time on this site. I'll drop that into the chat. All right. Anybody else? Thoughts, comments, questions? Thanks, Mark. That was super interesting. All right, Mr. Chuck, you were on deck. What was your project? I'm going to get a copy. Keep going.
Yeah, I was just going to bring up a discussion topic. Nothing I was going to do any share screening on or anything like that. Over this past week, I've been going further on what I showed previously, whereas I'm taking a bunch of records that come from various devices that produce historical data. I used the example of a thermostat, an Ecobee thermostat last week. And one of the annoyances with processing data like that is that almost always they express it in your local time zone. And here on the East Coast, we have this stupidity, as much of the United States has, of daylight savings time, which is a classic example of when you do not want politicians telling you how to measure things or to do things. So daylight savings time is a source of great irritation to anybody who deals with development operations or networking or just about anything that processes time-related data. The reason it's a problem is because the conversion to daylight savings time is not completely reversible. In particular, the fallback hour, which would occur in the United States in November, the first Sunday of November, duplicates the hour. And so whenever you look at something which is between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock on, for example, November 1st in 2026, you can't tell whether it's the first hour of the day or the second hour of the day. And so that's it's basically lossy conversion, and there's no direct way to get back. And so that got me thinking, well, are there ways we could deal with that? And I don't know how many other people run into this problem. This is maybe something that only people like me run into. But of course, universal time solves that problem, which is why just about every server and network device in any kind of professional setting is always on universal time. And that's just because it's just one time zone. And in fact, standard time without DST is the equivalent, equally useful. But because Tinderbox, like all other applications in the Mac, uses the local time and uses it correctly, we do have this issue that if you're processing data, you've got at least 1 hour of the year that you don't know which hour it is. And fixing that is not something you can do perfectly because there's no way to know which hour it is. And that got me thinking, well, are there ways that we could always refer to daylight saving to universal time instead of regular time? And again, I'm just observing that as frustrating as it is, if you have recorded time, that is, you've got a series of records that have time in them, unless you can depend upon that series of records being in order as they occurred, there is no way of discriminating between the 2 hours. So I just throw that out as an observation in case anybody else wonders into it. And it did get me kind of thinking, well, maybe I should just convert my Mac to running in universal time. That doesn't necessarily solve it when I get files from cloud services that are helpfully giving me, a pile of data that I asked for, because they're going to do it in my local time. But for other things that I might be doing, it'd be useful to perhaps avoid the problem of daylight savings time changes. And I just, again, I poked around at it, and I just share with other people the observation that the only way I know of to get applications running on the Mac to not convert time based on daylight savings time is to literally set your Mac to use a standard time or UTC. So I just point that out in case anybody ever runs into the problem.
But
And,
does that not then have other implications in terms of software updates and?
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is, it messes up all of your thinking about time, because if you're always, oriented toward your local time and you expect your clock to show you the current local time,
And that would
that's the reality. So
that would mess
So
with your
I kind
calendar.
of got into I wonder if there is a way to force an application to instead be in a different time zone. And maybe Mark Bernstein could comment on whether or not that's even feasible. But mostly I just wanted to share the observation that if anybody else runs into this, it is a problem. And you may not find a perfect solution to it, because once you are dealing with records that have already been timestamped with daylight savings time, you may not be able to tell which hour it is on that one day. And just be aware of it, because it can really bollocks up some analysis if you are depending on there being a fixed number of hours per day. So I just, like I said, I just thought the observations worth sharing with people in case anybody else ran into it. By the way, there is one thing you could do. It's a little bit expensive from a computational point of view, which is why I've been trying to avoid it. And that is, you could use a run command to, if you want to know what UTC time it is right now, you could use a run command to go to the Unix date command and pull out UTC time without, and have that be independent of what the current, your action code or stamps would always get UTC time for the current time or times relative to the current time. So just another way that people could potentially deal with that. And that's all. Just
And maybe Mr. Bernstein, Anderson, or Chuck, you know about this. Does regular expression have dialects like Markdown does? I mean, are there different systems that have different tweaks to regular expression, and how would we know? Mr. Anderson, what are your thoughts on that? Or
others may know. I mean, there definitely are, and if you have even, this thing which I normally keep to have, where is my O'Reilly copy of? There, anyway, one of these pocket references, because most of the time, if you're on a Mac, you're going to be using the PCRE, I think it is. I mean, basically, there are different flavors. If you're working on a Mac, most of the time, you'll always be in the same one. But if you went and worked with, I don't know, Microsoft Net or, some other languages, they have subtleties of difference that you'll come across. So in other words, realistically, I would say for most users of Tinderbox who aren't doing anything that's more programming related, generally the oddities about regular expressions are more just the general oddities of regular expressions, rather than you've got the wrong flavor. It's just something to bear in mind. That you showed that that Belgian website, the guy who used to make, I remember moons ago, back in his stuff back in the 90s for RegEx, and that for instance has variations, and it will, you can ask it, can I have it for this language, or for Java or C++, whatever. But I think for anyone watching this, by and large, that's not something I think the average user hopefully has to worry about.
one place I've run into it is when you're dealing with forward and back references. And my recollection is that several years ago, the version of RegEx that Tinderbox was using did not handle back references, but that could be maybe at the time I just didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
So that's a common area where I know you get into differences.
According to the technical definition of what a regular expression is, the regular expressions we have now that have the forward and back references are stronger than that. They'll recognize more things, which I realize probably nobody understands what I'm saying. So I'll shut up.
Another thing while we're talking about it too, which is a good resource, is, and maybe Mr. Anderson, if you got it handy, BB Edit Playground. Is that something you can
Michael, quickly before we sort of go too far to that, if anyone's looking online at references about regular expressions. The key thing, and Mark had mentioned this, PCRE, Perl compatible regular expressions, is the one you want to be paying attention to in somebody's blog post or whatever about it. And it's spelled PERL from the Perl programming language, which you may never have heard of, but was popular at one point. But that's the one to look for.
And that's what Tinderbox is based on?
More or less.
Yeah. Cool.
Gee, thanks, Gwen.
And there's actually a website, pcre.org.
The more or less is that the implementation that Tinderbox uses is from the underlying Mac stuff, which is based on the Perl stuff, but it's not the implementation. And so I don't know that it's standardized quite enough for you to be able to say, I've got a completely compatible implementation. But that should be on corner cases and not on typical things you're doing, as Mark said.
Got it. All right. And why don't we do this then? Just so people can see this as well. It's helpful. So I'm going to share my screen. A lot of the times too, I found this to be really helpful. And this was all tutorials from Mr. Bernstein, or Mr. Anderson. And that when you're messing around in Tinderbox and stuff isn't working, sometimes it's really helpful to use a different tool. So BBEdit, which is a text editing tool, under file menu, you can go file, new, and it's got something called pattern playground. And what the pattern playground does is it takes the text you have in the note or on your clipboard, and then it gives you the ability to like look at the different regular expression flags that Mr. Bernstein was just showing us. And so let's say I was going to ask BBEdit to like go find me in this text all of the lines where there are numbers. So I could say /digit period space, and it's now giving me all of the lines where there are numbers. And then I could say, then capture me, or then highlight all of to the end of the line, all of the text up, everything up to the end of the line. And so you'll now see I'm capturing everything up into the end of the line. And then using the concept of back references, or if I then wanted to capture that, I could put a parentheses around that, and that creates, not back reference, it creates what's called a capture group. And so now I'm saying, hey, grab me all of the items that start with a number up to an end of a line, and then capture me, and then capture that. And you'll notice that I'm now getting a capture group of 1, which I now can cycle through, and it will actually show me every line that it's capturing for me. And then if we were to again go back to the original text, and I'll show you where this pattern breaks. Let's say there's a 2-digit number. And we go back to our pattern. Typically that one shouldn't have captured, but if I do plus, so a digit plus, so any multiples of digits plus a period to end a line will then make sure I get double-digit numbers. So I find the BBEdit pattern playground really, really helpful when trying to debug regular expression that I'm doing in Tinderbox, because Tinderbox doesn't give you that visual, so you don't really know what Tinderbox is matching against and or successfully or unsuccessfully. So you can edit your regular expression in this environment, get it to work, and then bring that over to Tinderbox.
Does anybody happen to...
Sorry, Chuck, go ahead.
I was just going to say, does anybody happen to know if BBEdit is using the same underlying RegEx tools as Tinderbox? I assume it would be, but I looked a little bit the other day and I couldn't figure out whether it was the same as or different from.
Not sure. One thing I do know is the where you'd use $1 for back reference, you use /1 in BBEdit. I was looking at Chip and say that was something else. I'm not sure that the playgrounds are in the free version of BBEdit. As well, I mean, it's amazing actually. They give away pretty much everything for free. But
I
if
think you're
that
right. I
is the
think you have to
case,
pay for it.
yeah, and you're shopping a budget, there are actually, if you hunt around, there are now a fairly good number of websites online where basically you can do a PCRE expression and it'll do matching and it'll do this thing for you. And also in the App Store there's expressions, and I've got a number of them, and there's another one called something like patterns, I think. Patterns that again will allow you to basically put in, the thing you're looking for, and then chip away at it with a regex, because you can basically see the matched sections. And I certainly found, when I was first using regex, trying to sort of get my head around it, I found that remarkably useful because it helped clue me into whether what I was getting was what I thought I was getting. And you begun to, in other words, it helped you sort of decrypt. You understood the expression only after you see what it actually meant visibly on screen. So that's another way, if you're spinning your wheels, and you don't want to buy stuff.
Yeah, and in the App Store, here's that expression app you talked about. And so here you could go ahead and paste in, I don't remember how to use expression. But yeah, you can create an expression. Let me grab some of this text. I can grab that, paste that in, and then do the same thing. Just kind of test the different expressions, and then, and so expressions is a nice, it's a nice App Store based app as well, and it's got other tutorials that it will show you the different methods too. So it's a really nice little quick and dirty way to do it too. All right, anybody else? Okay, so what else would you all like to talk about? If you'd like, I'll happily share my diarization workflow that I've been playing around with, or we can discuss something else.
This is going from your written notes or audio dictation?
It's going from, so I'll show, okay, I'll just share my screen and show you the workflow. So it's, in true Tinderbox fashion, I can show you the messiness. So it's coming from the fact that I've been wanting to, and I'll show you my objectives have been transcribe, diarize, and summarize videos and audio files, reuse content from YouTube, classes or courses that I teach, train my digital twin. And my other goal with this has been to be able to protect my IP and privacy to the best that I can, and or the privacy of the people I work with. So then rather than uploading all of my material up into Otter or ChatGPT or other tools, let me process it all locally, so that I'm not leaking out information that I may not want to be leaking out into the world, and then maintain a safe and inspectable environment, and then enable a repeatable automation through Tinderbox. So that's been kind of my goal. And in this guide is something that I've been kind of developing after the fact, which I'll happily share. But it kind of talks about, the software, so the objective and purposes that I'm using it for, the elements of software that are needed to, oh, by the way, before I do this, let me stop. Roger Alexander, you had your hand up for a while and we completely ignored you. What was your contribution going to be?
Oh, I was going to make a statement about time zones.
Oh, let's go back to that. I just realized I ignored you and didn't bring
Oh,
it up.
that's all right.
So what was your statement about time zone?
Well, time zone. I'm going to put a comment in the chat that time zones are non-deterministic, and that's in the sense that there are no rules that the world lives by. No fixed set of rules. Time zones are often the result of localized policy. For example, Arizona doesn't observe daylight savings time, and other countries, regions around the world, they change quite often. So they're a pain in the ass to deal with. Company I worked for makes control equipment for the electric power system, the grid. And one of the things we do, we have devices, control equipment. We collect data from those devices. Well, one of the settings for the devices is the time zone it's deployed in. because for a very large power company, you could have devices in Eastern and Central Time and so on. And so when the data comes in, you need to be able to normalize it to, well, ideally to UTC or to something. And for other countries in the world that use our stuff, it's a real problem. You can't correlate the data because of time zones. They're an anathema that should be outlawed.
And you gotta wonder, like, why did we make Chuck, you've talked about this before too. Why did we make this so hard? I mean, what's the challenge of standardization, right? It really comes down to that.
Yeah, well,
Or
I would blame it on politics because daylight savings time was a political
Yeah.
action, not a rational action. It was we're going to save energy by giving people more daylight.
Yeah.
Probably something the petroleum industry put out there as a way to solve the concerns about the wasteful use of petroleum. No, I can't explain, a lot of what goes on, but it was bad policy. And it is increasingly, I see it all the time now that people are just enormously frustrated, even people who don't deal with the kind of world, Roger, that you deal with or that I deal with, where you need to have some kind of normalized sense of time.
Those people
They're
are
frustrated
lucky.
with, yeah. If they live in Arizona, it's okay. Those who live in areas that observe daylight savings time increasingly are frustrated by it. So
Yeah.
there's a real movement within Massachusetts to try and some of the other New England states to try and switch to Atlantic time year round.
But
Which
which
would be-
is that? What time
That's-
zone's that? Or how many
I think
hours?
Newfoundland.
Newfoundland, okay.
And Bermuda, it's the -4 time from UTC,
Gotcha.
which would be what we are on during daylight savings time. So basically, permanent daylight savings time is the way it's often characterized.
Well, isn't there's somewhere in the Middle East that I managed to have the joy of being half an hour. They're on a half-hour time zone,
Yes.
just because they can. But I mean, I was
Yes.
going to say you got to blame the railways for this. We all coped quite well enough until railway time arrived. We all had to be on the same wavelength.
Also, though, a shout out to the people who maintain the time zone files that we get on our computers, because they're
Yes.
incredibly complicated. And
Yeah.
to satisfy the human needs for all of that, it's an incredible piece of work that has made things pretty stable, even when places are changing their laws and things like that. So if we do move in New England to Atlantic time, it might be a somewhat smooth transition. Who knows?
And also,
Well, I was just going to say quickly, a shout out to the people who have maintained that stuff, because it is mind-numbingly difficult to keep track of all that and to deal with all the edge cases that keep cropping up. So it's a non-trivial exercise to not only keep track of all the various time zones in the world and how they shift and change, but also how do you deal with them if you're trying to go from one to another.
there are some super. I think they all they probably live on GitHub these days, but there are some marvelous collected things. Basically, they these days I think they all go on the title. People's misconceptions about. There's one about people's names. There's one about dates. There's one about times, and you lift the lid of that and you realize just how infernally complicated it is if you're doing anything more than the most basic sort of analysis of information.
Well, and before we go into my diarization, you've spent years of your life dealing with names from the ACM transcripts. You want to talk about the challenges of names that you've experienced with that?
Well, I'll give you one. Let's name it the ACM. Who really ought to know better? I was doing some proceedings last year, and it's covered some poor guys who happen to be Middle European and had things like C. Cedilla in their name, just dropped out. And I started to and fro with the sort of back end of the ACM, what gives, and the gist of it was, well, of course it wouldn't work. It's ASCII, and I'm thinking, okay, so it's 2024. And you're using ASCII because we've invented better things. So yeah, these things lurk around. I would say now say now compared to say 10 years back, broadly, just being able to type characters. Okay, sometimes you have to press a few extra buttons. I mean, the Macs are nice because normally if you just hold down a letter key, you get a little pop-up menu, which you can either click on the character, the accented or version character you want, or you can press a number if you're a sort of touch typist. And which makes life a lot easier, just putting things out. And I mean, an awful lot of tech stuff now is UTF-8. So if you're in something like BB-Edit as well, it will also render correctly. Actually, a really useful thing to know about in BB-Edit is, and where's it buried? It's the character palette. So basically, you open that up and you select a character in BB-Edit, and it will actually tell you essentially. It'll give you a whole lot of numbers, which you can then go and look up to find out it wasn't what you thought it was. Because this is one of the things, and this is what sort of naughty people do when they're trying to invade our systems, is there often is more than one way that you can make something look like the character you thought it was, and it isn't, and it's something else. And of course, to the computer, a different code is a different code. It just said put number 42 followed by number 46, whatever. Whereas we actually look at the glyphs we see on screen, and this hilarity ensues because things aren't what we think they are. But I think generally I don't find a problem now. So working with those, the interesting thing I have found is that there are areas where it's really hard. So one of the things it's not in part of the public data set I use because it's just too sensitive, but because someone had complained about effectively the gender representation in the conference I go to, I thought, okay, challenge accepted. So I went back over 2,500 authors, and the only things that were difficult were people from the sort of the dawn of the thing, so the late 80s, where people just used their initials. You couldn't tell who they were, and their old universities didn't keep records, hadn't digitized records going back, so who knew? Brazilians, where everyone seems to have their own name, and just all over the shop. So you can't look up, what the sort of hinting of this name might mean, because if you're the only person with that name, and Chinese and Japanese, Chinese and Korean proved quite difficult. Actually, even working with some first language speakers, they'd sort of say, well, I don't know, I can't tell all that, or so quite a lot of names. There's plenty in English, so things like Leslie, is basically a word that implies no gender. So it just shows all these things where we think that there are massive, sort of clear sort of data analytical divisions. There just aren't. And my best story on that was one name that I finally resolved because I actually found a picture of the gravestone. And I worked out from their partner's name, which was which. So that was, quite fun. But no, I sort of names just are difficult. Also, for instance, if you go into the Hispanic or sort of Spanish/Portuguese, where you tend to put your and they do it a different way, the Spanish and the Portuguese. I can't remember which way, but you have your mother's last name and your father's, or you have your father's last name and then your mother's last name. And different people use either both or one or the other. And sometimes the one that they're using isn't the last one. So, of course, if you then hit the Anglophone world, who just assumes that everything is all one type, again, a certain amount of confusion occurs. I see David's hands up.
Yes, I worked for the fruit company at one point. Anybody here remember what the fruit company was? United Fruit, the banana company. So they went into Central America and just bribed everybody up and down. So I was still working in punch cards, and boxes of cards would come up from the tropics to be run through a retirement information system. And this is a system written in COBOL, and this is 1978 or so. I really hadn't put my hands on a terminal yet, but parsing routine, they would go through the last name, and if it found a space or a dash, it would throw away the rest of the name. one of the implications in Latin America, and I use Latin America to mean central, not south, is, as Mark just said, you put, I think, your father's first name and your mother's last name, or the other way around, who knows? And if you only have one name, the implication is you're illegitimate. So I thought it was rather rude to send somebody who'd been slaving away in the banana fields to get a pension check that's saying he's illegitimate. I felt that was culturally insensitive, but that's just me.
Nice. Yeah, so as there's a lot in the name, as we've been talking about the last few weeks. All right, so let's go ahead. We've got about 15 minutes left. Let me go ahead and share my diarization process. So going back to the written goal here, and this looks prettier than the process actually was. What I started to do was kind of drive the car and run it at the same time. So going back and forth between ChatGPT and the system, and running into errors and playing around with different processes. And I ultimately ended up and landed on this. And really the goal here is, as I noted, was I realized I had all of these Tinderbox meetups we've been having, and I've got all the audio files and all the recordings from that. I have all of the classes that I teach, and I just wanted to get to a point where I could get to clean, relatively clean transcripts, diarized by speaker, speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 3. And then when I'm the speaker, map my voice waveform to the diary so that I can pull out where I've been talking in the particular videos and such. So that process led to essentially this document where the software needed, and again, it looks more complicated than it is. It's how do I word it? It's as complicated as you wanted to make it based on your experience. So Roger Alexander, and Paul Walters, 2 or 3 years ago, I remember the day Paul exposed me to regular expression. I'm like, what the hell is that? And I've since learned it. And Roger was the one that helped me start using command line without completely freaking out. But over time, I got more and more comfortable with using it, and now it's pretty straightforward. But the core software elements that I needed to make this work is, first of all, at the system level, Homebrew. And maybe, Roger, can you explain what a package manager is? I like, and there are different ones. I just happen to use Homebrew because you were the one that told me to use it.
Yeah, you had a couple options for the Mac, and in the Linux world, there are several different package managers. So basically, it's a tool that keeps track of, software packages, libraries, what have you, artifacts that you can install on your local computer for doing whatever it is you need it to do.
Okay, and so and that way, for example, so when I use Pandoc all the time, so because I've installed Homebrew, I can go to Brew and just say Brew, update Pandoc, and it updates all of the Pandoc libraries and does a whole bunch of magical stuff in the background that I don't understand. So you install Homebrew. Through Homebrew, you can install a version of Python, and so Mac OS runs on Python, but I've been instructed and informed it's kind of good to install don't use the OS native Python, install your own Python in a virtual environment, so you kind of keep those code bases separate. There is another file you can get called FFmpeg, which allows you to extract audio files from videos and a whole bunch of other transcoding capabilities. And then you can install Ollama, which we learned from Peter Wasilko a few weeks back, which is a frame for running an open source framework for running local LLMs. So that kind of got that up and running. And then you take your Python environment and you use another package model for Python called pip. And then from there, you can install various engines to do different types of work. So for example, OpenAI, and I learned this from, God, I haven't seen him in a while. not Paul Cushman. What's his name? I'll come to me later. Where OpenAI has a speech to text engine that it offers called Whisper. And there's a subset version of that called WhisperX, which allows you to actually not only do text to speech, but actually create transcriptions and then diarize those transcriptions. And diarizing is the distinguish between different speakers within that transcript. You then have something called Torch, which I don't fully understand what it does yet. I think I haven't documented it. And then Paynote, which helps you with the speaker diarization. And then finally, you'll leverage Hugging Face. Hugging Face is a company or software. I don't know how to best analyze it. It's a website that's out there where it's hosting millions of pipelines, models, engines. And when you subscribe to Hugging Face, you can actually get access to them, and then you like the PYA note model license. It's free, but you accept the license and basically you tell them what you're going to be doing with it, and then they'll give you a token, an environment token, an API key that you can use to interact with it. And then finally, the local thing I figured out was using ChatGPT, and I'll show it to you in a minute. I created a Python script, aka vibe coded this, to help me map through audio files to overlay my name on them. I recorded a reference wave file so that it would recognize my tone and inflections to help that happen. And then I created a text prompt specifically for my classes so that the Ollama model would spit back out the summarized transcriptions in the format and the style and the tone that I wanted. So these were the different, and honestly, all of this only took about maybe to get the first pass generally working about 2-3 hours, and in terms of duration, maybe a week, popping in and out and making it work. So the overall pipeline for this workflow is you grab a wave file, and I might want to update this really quick before I show that. Where's the pipeline? It starts with an audio file, but it often will start with a video and convert to wave. Right. So a lot of the times I have video files, and this process will work with a raw video file, but and I don't know why that didn't show up. Okay, so yeah, so what you do is grab your wave file, grab your WhisperX transition, use your diarization notes. That then creates named mapping, which then allows you to create a JSON text file transcript, which then allows you to summarize it with Ollama, which then the process will then create markdown for me that I can then pull into Tinderbox. And right now where I'm at is I'm doing all of this primarily right now through the command line. Once I've got the process up and running, which will be sometime hopefully later this afternoon, I'm going to be triggering all of this from run command. So then that way, what I'll do is I will create an attribute that shows where the video file is on my hard drive, and then have a stamp that will automatically parameterize all of the elements that I need, and then have the summary dumped into a child note within that note. So I've got like 300 of these that I need to do. So I'm first working on getting the workflow running through command line, and then once I've got it solid and it's working and all the code's proper, then I'm gonna use command line to trigger it all and make it work. So then this goes through and explains all of the different software components and what they do, talks about the dependency of the workflow and how it works. The first step I needed to do was set up the environment. So the first thing you need to do is go through and install all of the different pieces of software. So for example, you can install Python 3.10, and that will install Python for you. You then can figure out which versions it is. You then install your package manager. I then created a virtual environment, and what I've learned in this process is it's not that tricky actually. So I went ahead, and you can use command line to do all of this, but you can also just use the Finder. I took all of my kind of Python script stuff and stuck it in a folder called virtual environment. And then I told the system to install all the WhisperX code into this virtual environment. So that way it's all kind of running in one place on my hard drive. And if I ever want to delete it or delete these virtual environments, all I need to do is go hit delete, move to trash, and all of that code gets removed off of my computer, and it's clean and safe. You then go ahead and install the Python code. You install the FMMG code. You then go out and work through and get your Hugging Face tokens, and then create a file on your hard drive. Again, Roger, you'll be able to explain to this. The shell, you put the Hugging Face token in the shell, and so that's sitting off on your hard drive in a secure place. And then the applications note, the code knows to go look in the shell to get the Hugging Face token, so that then the various license code you're getting from Hugging Face will run properly. I think I explained that properly. But Roger, can you explain what the shell is and how that works again? I don't really know the details.
The shell's a program. There's the Z shell, which you have there, Bash, and bunches of other ones. But when you open up a terminal, you get a command prompt. You're running inside of a shell, and that's what it is. That's the thing. That's the command interpreter. You enter a command, press enter, it does something. Or you create a shell script, and then you run that shell script, and it does things.
Okay. Yeah, and then I'll demonstrate that in just a second. So then here's the process. So what you do is you convert the video to a WAV file. You activate the WhisperX environment so that the code is actually running in, I guess, RAM or something like that. The computer knows to be running. I then can use my WhisperX commands, and this is the path to the WAV file that you want to convert. There was some back and forth I had to do with to tailor the device. So right out of the gate, the code wanted the default to be using the GPU or CUDA or some other parameters on the Mac. And I found using the CPU of the device to be the most reliable flag to be able to do that. So you might run that. There was another, this int8, which I don't understand either, but there is a variety of compute type flags that it was trying to get me to use. And the one that we ended up on that's the most reliable is the int8 compute type. So I just put in those parameters per ChatGPT, said do this. And Dr. Hertz when I do that and do this. So ChatGPT said, don't do that, do this. And it worked. That's as far as I understand the process. And then you create a directory called transcripts, and that's where it dumps all the transcripts. You then use the Python script to apply the speaker diarization, which I'll show you in a second. I then run the Ollama setup, and then I can then do the summary. So to demonstrate that, I created some rough scripts. So is it this one? No. What did I do with it? Okay. Well, I can use some examples. So here's some like real world examples of some of the code. And then all I had to do was to go into my terminal and, for example, let me start a new. I was doing some iframe work there. Let me grab one of the code things. So let me grab like this one. Yeah, so if I were to do that and then paste that into terminal, and I can launch all of this stuff from, you'll see that the diarization process starts. And then ultimately, what I found is with a 90-minute, see here it's performing the transcription and it's working through the process. So with a 90-minute file, it takes about 2.5 hours to go through and detail it. So it's not a fast process. What that ultimately does, though, is it then spits out a whole variety of JSON files and text files. And so like here's the JSON of the audio of the video, and then here is the text transcript that you get back. all right, everybody, welcome to the 20 Jan 2022 class. And you'll see here's where I'm speaking. Here's where some of my students were speaking, and you end up with this output. And then what I could do is I would then run that through the Ollama transcription, and it would give me a summary of the class, and this is what we talked about. So I'll happily, we're out of time now, so I just wanted to kind of review that overall process, and then maybe in a future meetup we can go through it step by step. But now that I've got it up and running, it's super easy. I basically finish a class, save the video file on my computer, and then just go down the steps, transfer the wave, copy the command line over into the terminal, and within an hour or 2.5 hours, I've got full transcripts of all of the videos completely summarized, and then I can put that up into my class notes and share it with the students. And then I can give you an example of how that ends up in Tinderbox, which would be, for example, here. Active courses. I can then do my announcements here, where I said, hey, so I take that video from the class, I upload that video up and get the video ID from my school's LMS. I take the recap that got popped out of ChatGPT or the Ollama model, and now I've got my videos that are now in that, and I can then take my entire notes that I gave the students for that class and what we were doing. I can then copy this. I get the HTML ready export. I can now take all of that HTML and paste it into the school's learning management system, and I've got my announcements and all the notes for that class done. And it sounds like a lot of work, but now that it's up and running, literally I can have the duration of the 2.5 hours is kind of a pain, but if I just run it, walk away, go have lunch, come back, I've got all my notes and I can create my announcements and my classes are summarized and I'm done. And now I've perpetually got those done later. And then my goal here too is once that's done, the next step I'm working on is to then connect Tinderbox to my personal AI so that my speaking notes and the stuff that I pull out and when I'm training my personal AI, we can then, I'll be feeding all of that content into my AI so then people can have conversations with digital me and all of the knowledge and concepts and writings that I've been doing. And so that's kind of the end state part of my workflow is to be training this digital AI. It's a lot to review in 15 minutes, but that's the general overview. Thoughts, comments, questions?
Way cool.
All right. And again, if anybody wants to follow up or get the details on it before, I'll happily share. Okay, everybody. Thank you very much. Oh, and where is Digital You? Here you go. Here's Digital Me, Peter. If you click on that link, you can have a conversation with Digital Me. I'm still training it with all my material, but you can ask it questions and see what it comes back with. All right. I guess that's it for today, everybody. All right. See you later. Thanks. Bye-bye.